Hello, and welcome once again to Behind the Bench with Neil Francis, hosted by myself, Gareth Hewish, and John Donovan. We've got 2 episodes in the can already, and the last episode started a little bit of a Twitter bench clearance, our Tough Guys episode. Franny, you and Alan Keefe renewing rivalries, but nice to see that we've got other teams listening to us, and far from controversy, how you say.
Well, it did wonders for our viewing figure, so thank you, Kiefer, for that, and hopefully he's a regular listener now.
We hope so. And John, much feedback from you from the last couple of episodes?
My wife hated it. Thankfully, and Gaz, it's your concept, and Franny's really the star of the show, but everything I've heard so far has been complimentary. But as I said last time, for us guys, it's just sitting around the table talking hockey, and that's not half bad. And
we are going to do that again today. We have the 2014-2015 season, arguably one of the most pivotal seasons in Devils history. And we're going to go through it from beginning to end, all the highs, and there were many, many, many of them. And only a few lows this time, unlike the record breaker year, we ended on a bit of a downer. But this one will not be the case. A little spoiler for anyone who wasn't around at the time. Very quickly, we're going to brush over the season before, very quickly with you, John. Mm-hmm. It was a season that wasn't great. From a fan's point of view, the fans needed a bit of change.
They did. It was a hard season, and not going to delve into it too deep because it was pretty painful, and I was involved from the supporter side of things with the supporters club, and some of the things I did I thought were okay, and some of the things I didn't think were okay, and I look back now with certain regrets. But no, the club as a whole and the fans were at a low point, and it certainly needed a lift, but never in a million years did I think it was going to get the lift that it got and continues to get.
It all happened in June, a time where these days rosters are almost complete and ready to go, but at the time there was one lowly Devil signing in Ben Barnes, and then all of a sudden from nowhere a new consortium comes in. Steve King, Tom Kelman, all the guys, Neil Francis, of course, all coming in, and everything just turns on its head within a week. And Franny, I'll come to you first. You have to work pretty quickly to get everything on the road to the season. That starts with a coach. There was one in position already, and Dave Whistle. He is relieved of his duties. Andrew Lord is installed as player coach. Why Lordo?
I mean, first of all, it was because of what we were coming off the back of. It was felt that we couldn't carry a full-time dedicated coach, so that decision had to be made, and we had to go with a player coach just because we had to test the water to see, if we could repair the damage that had been done, and how quickly. And as soon as we were considering a player coach, 2 names came to mind straight away. One was Mac Faulkner, previous captain, and pretty much held the place together during the previous year, and the other was Andrew Lord. And Faulkner wasn't available because he'd just been offered the Harvard scholarship, so he was back there. And Andrew Lord straight away, just because of his diligence, I think, as a person, the passion that he showed. I got to know Lordo, well over email over the 3 years prior to him signing for the Devils, and I knew how detailed he was in terms of the questions that he was asking about, every single aspect of when he was coming over. But then getting to know him a bit as a person, and the way that he played, and the aim of the club when it was taken over. First of all, I think it was to earn trust in the new ownership. The aims that we set out at the start was to earn trust in the new ownership, because obviously a lot of people had maybe lost their trust in the Devils. it was to re-establish the identity that had been lost to the Devils. You know, we always talk about Devils hockey, don't we? And when you're looking at Devils hockey, there's a great read across to Andrew Lord, and you know, he had a passion for improving every day as a player, helping those around him. He'd had that year in North America where he'd had a bad concussion in pre-season, missed the whole year. This is when he just had it signed, I think, his first American League contract in Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he had been used by an American League team as their video coach analyst because he's got a great hockey brain and he's a very smart guy. So you had all those qualities in together, and, you know, the guy stood head and shoulders as, I think, we didn't even bother considering anyone else because, you know, he was the ideal candidate if he was interested. Talked to him in some off-the-record conversations, and you just saw the excitement light up in his face. At the time, I couldn't even tell him about Todd Kelman. You know, that was under wraps. He just knew that there was something good was going to potentially happen. And he actually wrote me a letter to pass on to this unnamed person about why he was the person for the job, and it was pretty remarkable. And I think as soon as Todd read it, he's like, "Okay, that's that then."
Well, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I don't think anyone could argue that that was a remarkable choice. And hats off to you, Frank, for seeing something in him at that time.
Just on that, guys, I think, and you know, we've been privileged enough to be with Andrew Lord down on the benches, doing interviews with him, what have you, and you know, he talks to us off camera a little bit. Not naming names, but that shows a huge amount of trust by Andrew Lord in Franny and the potential project, because there were other, certainly British teams that were trying to get Andrew Lord on their roster, which he's told us about, and he just wanted to wait it out, and to wait it out that long into the summer. I think Franny must have done a great sales job first and foremost, but you know, just speaks again of the type of person Andrew Lord is, and how the dedication he's shown to Cardiff, that he wanted to be here, and he was prepared to wait and not take offers to see if this project could come to fruition.
So the team is launched at a Meet the Owners event. Steve King was golfing in Scotland and made a trip down to Cardiff to meet the fans of his new hobby, which I'm sure he didn't realise quite what a journey it was at that time. But Lauder was officially announced. Everyone gets to meet Steve King and Todd Kelman for the first time as Devils owners. And some players are announced as well, some returnees and two young upstarts, Chris Culligan and Joey Haddad. Now, in my research, I was reading an Echo article about Chris Culligan. And he basically mentions that the Devils were in contact with him before the ownership change, which is quite interesting. Ryan, do you know anything about that? And how did Chris Culligan get on your radar?
Chris Culligan came about through Dan Lacosta. So, you know, Lacosta, like an absolutely superb guy, and, you know, we know the difficulties he faced when he was here. However, you know, he made some great friends when he was here, and, you know, I'd like to count myself, and I know Lordo would as well. So he'd always been talking about, he's a hockey guy as well. You know, he's got his goaltending clinic. He was always talking about guys that he'd played with. You know, he said that the Canadian University League has maybe got some hidden gems in there. You know, and talked about some guys that he played with, and, you know, he was always sort of bouncing guys that may be interested for other years. And Culligan was a guy that he mentioned, he'd been captain in that team. And, you know, he just said, this guy will fly, you'll just love him, he can do anything. He could play in the American League. And I think at the end of that season, the last season before he came to us, he got called up straight from Canadian University into the American League and played a few games, and then played in the Coast and had a point a game or whatever. So always very interested in him. The more and more we looked into him, he just looked like he would be, you know, a great fit for what we were trying to put together. And it was then through, you know, we got the deal done with Cully, and it was him that recommended Joey Haddad, you know, a good friend of his, and obviously knew that Joey was a heck of a player that would fit in as well. And the more we looked at Joey Haddad, and the references we got on him. I think the one quote that I keep using about Joey Haddad is one of the coaches in the East Coast League said he's the most complete player in the East Coast League, which was quite the accolade. And when you look at the Joey Haddad you see today, he doesn't lead the scoring charts, but some of the play. I mean, the best puck retention I've ever seen of any player. He's very robust as a player. He'll go to the dirty areas. He can play a little bit of that agitator role. Great goal scorer. Smart guy and an all-round first-class individual.
Yeah, Callaghan's one of the most intelligent hockey players I've seen play for the Devils. I think there was a little bit of pressure on him initially because he was playing as first-line centre, and I'm not sure. New to the league, he was ready to perhaps carry that. But as the season wore on and maybe he moved down the lines a little bit, and of course his mobility in terms of positional mobility came into effect seasons after. But as a hockey player who could read the game, he's got to be up there. And Haddad, he's going to be a cult hero for the Devils for years to come. I thought Finity was good down low, but Haddad's in another level again. And I always jokingly tell him he should shoot more because he's got a hell of a release on him, and maybe we don't always see it, but when he hits that puck, it travels at some speed.
Yeah, interesting you say about Callaghan's ability to play, his versatility to play in any position, and I think we did, apart from dressing him in goal, I think we played him in every position there was. But I was speaking to his dad. Dad's another great hockey person. And I really enjoyed the conversations with him, and it was at the time when he'd moved back on D, which I think was probably the season after. And he said, he's never played D before in his life. And we assumed that he'd always been, he was asked to do this job. He did it for us very effectively one game, and then he became like our swingman. If we had a D man down, he would jump back there, and it could be the same game. He would jump forward, and that takes a special player to do that. But the fact he'd never played D before, and it just shows what a hockey IQ the guy had.
If there's a podcast we do in months, years to come of Devils we'd like to have seen stay around longer, he'd probably be at the top of my list.
I think that's an episode. I might go on a poll. Thank you for that.
We got the gap now for next.
I'm going to mention Brabant.
John, this event and this signing of players en masse very late in the day echoes to me of the first year in the tent when we had a very similar event. And I think on that day we announced Beer Breyer, Mark Smith, Dave Iannazzo, all at once. Right. Yeah. That was a team that seemed to come together very late as well. Two very, very good teams, though. Do you think there's much in that in terms of chemistry when you got guys, and this is a question for both of you really, when you got guys coming in sort of in the trenches, I guess?
I think there's something in that. One of my big regrets as a Devils fan, I wasn't at this event. I had been a little burnt the year before. I can't remember whether Franny probably wasn't playing at the time. We used to play Thursday five-a-side football, and it was on a Thursday night. And
I definitely wasn't there.
No, you definitely wasn't. I thought I'd play Thursday five-a-side football and go home and kind of hide in the corner a little bit. But obviously, being a Devils fan, I was intrigued, and Paul Sullivan did a great kind of summary of it afterwards. And I think the market's an interesting one, and Franny's probably better to speak on this. Obviously, it's late to be putting a team together, but at the same time, I guess you probably have some quality players who have been waiting for options, and maybe for one reason or another haven't been signed up yet, and with other teams perhaps having, completed their rosters or got most of their rosters. But the Devils, whilst in a difficult position, maybe had a little bit of strength there that they weren't competing at that time with so many other teams.
Yeah, it was a funny one because we did. Obviously things were going on in the background. It may happen, it may not happen. And we were seeing players that we would have liked signing for other clubs, and you're just like, okay, there's another one we've lost. And, that would include some of the Cardiff players. I mean, one thing that we decided is that we need to have a massive overhaul of the club, following on for that season. It needed to be a new identity. And there was only a handful of players that we wanted back, basically. And the first person that we signed, and was actually signed before the deal was officially done, was Tyson Marsh, because we knew he would be a cornerstone of a good team. interestingly enough, as I wasn't involved in the latter half of the previous season, a few players had spoken to me about helping them get jobs, almost like representing them to find them a job, because they knew I had contacts and the rest of it, and knew the league and what was available and all that kind of stuff. So I helped a few guys, and it was my way of kind of keeping my hockey bug alive. And Marshy was one of those, and I met up with Marshy, and he'd, the year before, I think we messed him about, to be honest, because he had that. If you remember the first season he was unbelievable when he first came in. He had a shoulder injury, came back too soon, confidence went, and he was shaky. And it's like, right, do we resign this guy? What are we going to get? Are we going to get the guy at the start of the year, the guy that finished the year? And we did mess him about.
I actually remember seeing you on Mill Lane the day we were about to sign him, and he was the last guy, wasn't he, that we signed that year?
He was the last guy. In the end, we were like, we had a gut feel that we loved him as a guy. Loved him as a leader in the dressing room, and it was just that nagging doubt that how his season sort of fell apart. And then we're like, well, maybe it was the injury. But anyway, he got messed about, and he goes, I don't want to go through another summer like that. The situation in all the league. Can you help me find somewhere? And I was actually talking to other clubs in our league and recommending him to go, and it was actually to Braehead. Okay. Finner was coach at the time. I like Finner a lot, and got a lot of respect for Finner. Finner obviously liked Marshy and knew what he could bring. And I was saying to Marshy, this is where you need to go. This is where you need to go.
Thinking about it, that would have been a really good fit.
It would have been a great fit for them. And the contract was about to get signed, and there was a delay at Braehead's end in terms of producing the paperwork. And I think maybe they challenged on some terms of the deal, and it was delayed. And Marshy's like, "Oh my God, is this falling apart?" And then I had to turn around to him, and obviously I had the okay from Todd to do this, and I was like, Marshy, I don't want you to go to Braehead. And he's like, what? You've been telling me all along that Braehead is where I got to go. I said, no, I want you to sign in Cardiff. And he's like, what? Where's this coming from? And I said, okay, Marshy, you're in the circle of trust now. And I told him about Lordo, about Todd Kalman, and you could just see his face every time I'm mentioning these. He's like, you're kidding me, you have me on here. And I said, this is going to be a new platform. We've got these great owners coming in. I've got to learn a bit about them, and they're hockey fans first and foremost. This is their passion. This is going to be the first day of a new dawn for the club, and we want you to be a key figure. We want you to be captain. And we actually, normally we would appoint the captain from the sort of locker room and stuff like that. But we decided we wanted Marshy as the figurehead and the captain. And he's like, wow. He goes, well, give me, how long have I got to think about it? I was like, well, we need to know pretty soon. The deal's about to go ahead. Braehead obviously are keen to get you tied up. So it was overnight, and, he was umming and ahhing about it. And, he phoned me back, and he's like, okay, I'm going to trust you on this. I'll sign, but I don't want to be captain. And we're like, what? That's like an honour. Most people are waiting all their career to be asked to be captain on something. And he's like, yeah, but, I was just thinking about last year when, I think Falks had different people living on his floor every weekend, and all the stuff that Falks had to do. He was lending guys money, he was doing all, and I think that had kind of soured Marshy's view of what a captain could be. And I was like, Marshy, trust me, this is going to be a totally different gravy here, and obviously eventually accepted the captain, and a great captain he was too.
Absolutely.
Was he comfortable on Faulkner's sofa, John?
Always got a warm reception from Mrs. Faulkner wasn't so impressed.
So then when we looked at other guys from the existing roster that we'd want to take, Jake Morissette was right up there. And I think, we've talked about that opening night, and there was 6 or so players named. And then we had, if you remember, the sort of drinks after in the Cuckoo Club at Park Plaza. Yeah. And all the fans are buzzing because, Todd Kalman has spoken, and we know, Todd is fantastic in a room.
He's okay.
Steve King spoke, and again, when you talk about things fitting together perfectly, the fact that Steve King was in the UK on the day, I mean, he's so busy with his, with his job that there's no way he could have flown across. However, he just so happened to have booked these days off, and he flew down from Scotland to be there. So people could. It wasn't just this kind of urban legend that we've got these owners in Canada, almost like the Slapshot, the new owners relocating the team to Miami kind of thing. He was there, and again, Steve is you can get the genuineness straight away from him, and it was great to see. And when he spoke about the club and everything that he had planned. It's happened. I mean, I always remember the bit he said, if it's the choice between making a profit or if Lordo comes to me and says I need another player, it's another player every time, and he's backed that up every single year.
You were going to touch about the Morissette thing, and I think that's really interesting. That I think of all the signings, he was the one everyone went, "Ooh, okay." But because I think the year before he'd been missold, he'd been brought in as a guy that was going to score a lot of goals, and he has scored goals in his career, but he's so much more than that. And everyone had a difficult year the year before, and I think there was still a little bit of doubt about what Jake Morissette brought as a player.
Yeah, it definitely, and it was like, I love the look of these signings, this and the other, but the one I'm not convinced on is Morissette. Out of all the players that we haven't re-signed, maybe there's a couple ahead of him, and the answer that I gave at the time, which is still true to this very day, is the benchmark that we want to set for effort, for passion, for being the selfless team player is Jake Morissette. And you look at the way that he's played every single game for this organisation in terms of the blocking of the shots, the penalty kills, all the intangibles, and maybe they're things that the armchair spectator doesn't appreciate as much as a teammate would. We knew Jake Morissette was going to be an integral part of this club.
Absolutely.
Shall I go again? Because I got some other bits of insight, if you like. We mentioned Ben Bounds was the only Devils player signed. I had to make a call to Ben when he was on holiday to say there's going to be an announcement tomorrow. There's new ownership for the club, but don't worry, your job's safe. So
there was no reservations. Ben Bounds is obviously a very talented netminder and had a couple of strong years at Hull, but on a struggling team, and he was a signing prior to the takeover. Were there any reservations from Lordo or Todd about having a British netminder in there? Did they want to go another way?
Bounds had always played really well in Cardiff, and it's something Phil Ozair always talked to me about, is that for some reason Bounds suits the Big Blue Tent is because the size of him, the way he plays his angles, he's always really successful. So that was a good starting point. Todd had a lot of success with British netminders in the past. You look at Stephen Murphy, look at Stevie Lyle. The benefit it gives you of that extra import. And I remember Todd at that launch of the new era. Todd talking about how we were going to build a club around Ben Bounds, and I'm not even sure if he meant it at the time or whether it was a boost of confidence. But from that moment, Boundsy kind of just embraced the belief that the club had in him, and it was a stroke of genius. And to be fair to Todd, he's absolutely stood by that. We have built the club around him. The little things like sending him to an NHL goalie coach in Canada, just that investment in him as a person, Boundsy has repaid to us in his performances and his loyalty and his dedication for the club. So that was there wasn't when we knew that Boundsy was in situ, if you like, we were very happy to keep him there. We had the belief in him. What people don't know is that we were actually handed a list of 6 players that we were told had signed contracts with the Devils under previous. The contract didn't exist, but I think there was some kind of agreement with previous management and coaches. And we looked down the list, and there were, some of the deals we weren't happy with and everything, but there was one other guy that was on that list that had been agreed that was interesting for us, and that was Doug Clarkson. So he was on that list. And Clarkson was somebody that came up the year before, that G and I were interested in, I think the summer before. Or actually, it was the latter end of the season. I think he was looking to move out. And obviously, the first thing you look about him, he's a massive guy. By all accounts, had skill, but he just didn't have the playing resume to even let you make a judgment about it, because he played so few games. Because I think the year that we signed him, he was on an American League contract with Adirondack, and he played maybe 4 or 5 games for them, and he played 5 games, and he played 9 games in total that season, which is nothing to base it on. So it was a huge gamble. And Phil Hill had always told me about this guy that he had skated with when he went over to visit Mac Faulkner, and he went on some skates with some NHL guys, and he'd seen this big guy who could handle the puck fantastically, quick release of his shot and all that kind of stuff, and he thought he was an NHL player, and it turns out it was Doug Clarkson. And he always said, if you get that guy in, I'm guaranteeing you he'll get 20 goals. Mac Faulkner spoke highly of him, and he said, you're looking to recruit people as well as players, and first class person, and Mac Faulkner is somebody that I trust with absolutely everything, and he was dead right on that, because Doug Clarkson is one of the nicest guys that you'll meet, and we know he's a follower of the podcast, so he's giving us a shout out, so that just gives him extra points in my eyes.
I can tell for, didn't he?
Yeah, he is ripping it up there. But so we had these conversations about, of all the people that have maybe been promised they've got a job here, some that we didn't want and they didn't fit into the plans, and we had to have awkward conversations, but we were upfront about them and said, look, there's nothing in place. We're not taking over the team. This is a totally new ownership. And we're looking to start from scratch. But Doug Clarkson was a guy that we felt was interesting enough that that we wanted him, and ended up with him. And another story now, I'm thinking about it, about Doug Clarkson. So he had this deal agreed with the previous coach, and I get a phone call, and it was from, or maybe an email first followed up by a phone call, and it was from an NHL agent. So it's actually Dougie's brother's agent, who's actually a family friend, and this guy is a big hitter in the NHL, has got like several multi-million-dollar clients, and he's like, can I call you? I want to speak to you about Doug Clarkson. And obviously he was looking to protect Dougie's interest because he's his family friend and stuff, and he's like, he thought he was coming on this kind of agreement, and we had to sort of explain. So I'm having this conversation over hundreds of pounds with this NHL agent that is, used to dealing in multi-millions. And it was just the weirdest conversation. I just think, I dread to think what he thinks of our league, because we were literally, talking over a few pounds here and there. And I think it ended up coming down to Doug was going to bring over a signed shirt from his brother that we could auction off or something like that. And I think that sealed the deal.
Did you try to sign his brother while he was on the phone?
Oh, I wish.
One of the best backhands in the league, I think, Doug Clarkson. If you said for a big guy, he had very, very good hands.
Amazing
and
hands.
On his backhand side down low, he was superb.
Finished with 17 goals and 21 assists as well. What a good return that is.
So Phil Hill owes me something then, because he guaranteed 20 goals. But I'm sure when you add in Challenge Cup and all that, I think Doug was over 20.
That would probably only cover league goals. 144 penalty minutes. And as we discussed last week, the best uppercut possibly in Devils history. It came from nowhere. And I think Mike Egner still, when he closed his eyes, sometimes feels
I think he's still fetching his helmet because it's still travelling.
Yeah. But just a very good. But the second half of the season, that third line with it, Myers, Haddad, and Clarkson, and we talked about the record-breaking podcast about the strength of the third line, the strength all the way through. And you think about that third line, that was some depth, and they were all role players, and Haddad and Myers always had a little bit of chemistry, and Clarkson could crash and bang. But if you just said Gaz, he could also put points on the board. So there was depth right the way through that lineup.
Certainly was, and. The signings came thick and fast in the preceding weeks. You got Carl Hudson brought in, Jesse Mitchin, who we'll cover in a little bit, because I think that's an interesting player in Devils history. Also, the returnees, Matthew Myers comes back, Josh Batch comes back.
Chris Jones and Luke Piggott came back, so all of a sudden we started looking for the first time in a while about real depth, because we had our three lines that were, like you just talked about, that third line is legit, and then we've got guys like Jonesy and Pigsy ready to step in, and as we know, we've already been caught short over previous years with lack of depth. And knowing that we had those guys that were playing on the third line, sometimes on the second line the previous year, ready as role players on that fourth line, ready to step up at any opportunity. And, they did a great job. We'll talk about later about the Mitchin injury. Jonesy steps up and, puts up, I think, 10 points in the year. and Pigsy, the energy shifts that he provides, and a big part of it.
And the last signing, a little unknown called Joey Martin.
I want to actually give myself a bit of credit. I recognised Joey Martin pretty early because Todd for about 3 weeks wouldn't go on the mic, and thought he'd busy himself with other things, and I was doing a little bit of camera work up in the corner, what Dave Elson does now along with Hubs and what have you. And obviously my camera work would have been shocking, and Todd was making notes in his book about no toilet paper and that sort of thing, and clearly was very frustrated that people weren't hearing or seeing him too much. And he just asked me, what do you think of the team? I said, I really like that Joey Martin guy. I remember my comment was, he makes his wingers better players. And I don't even know if that actually makes sense as a hockey term. But
it sounds good. I'd have bought that.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I'm a salesman, as we covered earlier. But those first couple of friendlies, we played Belfast, didn't we, in a couple of friendlies at home.
Yeah.
I remember Joey Martin. He didn't put up a whole host of points, but just immediately you saw that this was a guy who the team, he could really put the team on his back.
Yeah, Joey was a guy that. So one of Lordo's great strengths, as we know, is his diligence, and he will reach out to all his contacts in North America. So he tapped up a few trusted contacts of his, and one of the names that came back was Joey Martin, and we wanted a two-way centre, that kind of thing, and already I think we had Culligan in the bag, and we're looking for a second line centre basically, and Joey Martin's name came up, and then the guy said, look, if you can get him, just do it. He won't let you down. He's always getting points. Even if you don't notice him some games, he's got points, but he's very, very underrated, and he would be a great guy for you, and it was a trusted source. So then we got word that we got in contact with him, and he was actually going to sign in Italy. At the time, the Italian league was probably rated a bit higher than ours. So he had a deal agreed in Italy, and it was probably a bit more money than we could offer at the time, because the first year we definitely were a budget team still, because we just did not know what was going to happen in the stands. So Lordo got talking to Joey, and Lordo asked direct questions and found out about his personal life, and for housing point of view, we were looking at who could fit in where, and ideally we wanted someone that could share. It turns out that Joey Martin and Doug Clarkson were good friends, so they ended up actually sharing an apartment. In the days before we could, we just now get everybody at their apartment and splash the cash. But so they were good. He would have been comfortable sharing, but the real kicker for it was. Megan, his now wife, had never travelled with Joey before, because she's got had a good job in their hometown. Joey'd always travelled to the States to play hockey, and this was going to be the first time over in Europe that they'd actually spent the season together. So as soon as mentioned that he's bringing the girlfriend, I said to Lordo, find out what she does. Find out what she does. See if we can maybe help with a job or something like that. So. We found out, and she works for Eversheds and as an accountant. Great, there's an Eversheds in Cardiff. No, sorry, not Eversheds, Deloitte. Deloitte, yeah.
But Eversheds are good too.
Yeah, and if either Deloitte or Eversheds want to sponsor the podcast, then we'll gratefully receive that money.
Yeah. So she works for Deloitte. She's an accountant. I think we got some people that we knew influential within the city to make some inquiries within Deloitte to see if was there any positions, and actually the kind of work that she does was quite specialised, but they were short of them, and she was obviously a valued employee back home, and her boss was open to putting in a word for her to get an opportunity to go and see another part of the world. So again, when you talk about everything lining up, it turns out that she could take a secondment in Cardiff, which means he's got his girlfriend that's living with him. She's got a job that far outweighs the extra money that you're doing in Italy. He knows someone on the team in Doug Clarkson. Andrew Lord is very good at selling the vision, and everything fitted in. And we got Joey Martin, and
he's okay.
That turned out all right.
Yeah, he's okay.
God bless financial conglomerates.
It's the first time that's been said.
Still after that advertising money, aren't I?
Yeah.
So the season then gets underway in earnest. and the 14-15 new look, new era Devils hit the ice, and it's okay. It's okay from September through to October. The team's running at about 50% wins, 50% losses. John, you're always one to make a quick judgment in a good way on what you see, and you're always an opinion I sort out at the beginning of the year, as I always do. What were your first impressions of the 14-15 Cardiff Devils?
I like the team. I like the team a lot. I guess those challenge games or pre-season games against Belfast, I saw enough in, and I think we won one, lost one, maybe, I can't quite remember, but we certainly went up against the what were at the time the defending league champions in the Belfast Giants, who'd won it at Cantor. I think they won it in September the year before, and we matched up well against them. And then I remember also going out for a very early season doubleheader in Belfast, Friday and Saturday, where I think we actually lost both games, but the Friday night game we should have won, and we really went toe to toe again with the Giants, who were the benchmark from the year before, that first team to really get 4 or 5 D men that they were activating and jumping into the play and just swamping the zone and really playing some beautiful hockey, murdering teams. And I thought there was depth. Someone like Brent Walton, I remember very early on for being a guy maybe not in the greatest condition, but his stick handling was sublime. Funnily enough, and him and I have got a little bit of not a checkered history, a fun history. The one guy initially I thought, he's come with a big reputation, I'm not sure on this, was Andrew Hotham. I thought he started a little slowly.
And did you say that on commentary at the time? Is that
no, that came later when I misspoke. And if Andrew's listening, you are fantastic, obviously. But he was the one guy I thought, I'm not sure whether his reputation is quite what it's come in with, and obviously he turned out to be fantastic, so what do I know? But no, short answer, from those first pre-season games against Belfast, who were the cut above the year before, and Calvin Elfring was one of my favourite players, and he still remains one of my favourite players I've seen in this league, and you had Keith and Lloyd, who we've talked about before. The Devils went toe-to-toe with them, and it was optimistic.
Ironically, that Keith and Lloyd line that tortured us in Cardiff for so long was the basis behind our third line. That's what, when we were looking to build the team and we were mapping out just what we were looking for to re-establish this identity, that was one of our big aims for the season. Because we always said we want to win the trust back, we want to get our identity back, and we want to be competitive. And that was our kind of mantra. We weren't talking about winning anything, but to get that third line where you've got Mitchen, Doug Clarkson and Matthew Myers, and I think when they started forechecking the way that they could, all big bodies, all banging and crashing, I think that's when people got excited, as well as a guy that we have to mention who is an absolute key part of bringing that identity back, is Trevor Hendricks.
Yes.
In one of those early Belfast games, I think he fights Keith, who had the run of Cardiff. And Hendo steps up against him, and straight away everybody's on their feet, and they knew that we had a legit heavyweight that would have everyone's backs, and what a job he did of that. And again, Hendo is a listener to the podcast, so we say hi to you, Hendo.
Absolutely.
And Hendo is actually one thing I want to mention. I think Hendo is the best thing that's happened to the Cardiff Juniors in the over the last 10, 15 years. So he's now come in doing his hockey skills thing, and
It's in Elgin, I think I saw on Twitter. So if anyone wants to go to hockey school in Elgin,
but his involvement with the Cardiff Juniors, I think, is going to revolutionise that club, and really pleased to see him back in Cardiff, and still making a massive impact in the Cardiff hockey scene. But I digress. But having Trevor Hendricks, the player, on the team was. It was the tough guy that everybody likes to see. He knew when to enforce, when to do that, and going up against Keith early on and having a great scrap with Keith was the beginning of something that was really exciting for Devils fans.
Not a bad role model for Josh Batch, because they tended to play together.
They did, yeah, and I think that brought the best out of Batchy too, didn't it? You definitely. Batchy's a confidence player, and I don't think you can get more confidence playing with a guy like Trevor Hendricks that was experienced. He'd won 2 championships with Alan.
Yeah.
So he had him alongside him as a player, as a reliable player, but also the toughness that helped Batchy then play a tougher style, and those two I thought bounced off each other really well.
Trevor Hendricks is the sort of person where as a child, if you kicked your ball into their garden, you'd be too scared to go and answer it back. You just had that mean look all the time.
I think Trevor Hendricks actually is the person that would kick your ball into someone else's garden so you can't get it back.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then steal your bike.
But wears ginger facial hair very well. Just gotta say that.
You've got to have role models, John.
Got to have role models.
So, as I say, September, October, the Devils are running at about 50%. And then, all of a sudden, in November, from November the 9th, the Devils win 3-2 against the Belfast Giants. And that starts a run of games where there's only 2 losses in around 15 to 20 games. It's a real run that goes right through Christmas, right to the New Year. Ronnie, what was the catalyst for that brilliant run, which takes the Devils right into a title challenge?
I think it was the establishment of the line of Martin, Lord and Morissette as the best line in the country.
Yes.
Now, nobody expected that because, like you said, when we brought it in, it looked like it was going to be Cully, Haddad and Walton was going to be our top line. One of the things that I said to Lordo early on when we were talking about the discussions about being a player coach, I know how much pride Lordo takes in his personal game. And I said, Lordo, one thing I want you to accept now, because otherwise it's going to eat away at you, is your point production is going to drop. You have got more responsibility. You're going to have to be thinking strategically in the games. You might end up dropping down the lineup some way to try and manage the two. Player coach is the hardest job in hockey. And, your production, don't be surprised if it cuts in half. I think he was a point a game the year before. Don't be surprised if it cuts in half. And if you're doing that, it's still fantastic. I don't want you to get disheartened about it because I knew that kind of guy Lordo is, it would eat him away. And how wrong was I? He ends up on that top line. I don't think it was by choice that he wanted to be the top line. Not at all. I think he'd been happy playing down the line. But when they came together as a line and they started to click, it became the dominant line in the country, didn't it? It was the line everyone was trying to shut down. And it was the perfect combination where we talked before about having Pele, the smaller agile guy, Matzke, the two-way centre, and Max Beerbry, the power forward on that. It was almost like a mirage of that, and it was having him there. He did so much of the banging and crashing. Talking about getting the crowd into a game straight away, we would start the biggest 2 wingers. And Mo was always a bit peeved off that we'd sometimes sit him back and we'd put Batchy up on the wing for the first shift or whatever. He'd be like, "What have I got to do?" But I was like, "Well, you got to be 6'2".
And you stretched him and stretched him still.
But and Lordo would go out there and he would lay a hit. Crowd would be on its feet, and the blue tent became a fortress again, didn't it? It did. We'd had it as a fortress before. It had become a place that teams had been comfortable coming in, and all of a sudden you had Devils starting off the games like that. You got Trevor Hendricks throwing massive hip checks and making the wall shake in there.
Yeah.
But I think the establishment of that top line was the catalyst, because everybody was focused on them and they battled through it and they still produced. And then you've got the backup of people like Cully, Haddad, Walton, and then we talked about that energy line that we were trying to mirror the Belfast energy line that worked so well, and it did. So we had that energy, and it was also the group of guys that we had. It's it's easy to say every year, "Oh, this is my favourite group of guys," but that was a special group because I always think it's a special group when you start something from scratch, and that's what we were doing. We were rebuilding from scratch, and everybody was friends on that team, and everybody was really close, and that was starting to come out in our play. The lines got established, and our identity was back, and everybody had that swagger.
Oh, absolutely. I completely concur that Martin, Lord, Morissette line. You forget how good it was, and we talked about Gerard Adams in the Record Breakers year, and we tend to think of G now as a coach. And I said I loved him as a player. And the first season he was in Cardiff, he was my favourite player. it's wrong of a mid-30s man to have a favourite player, but Andrew Lord, the player, was my favourite player, and that's because he would bang and crash, but again, hockey IQ, great hands for a big man, and when he used to cut from kind of outside to in from the half wall and cut across, and you couldn't stop him in flight, and he also knew when to do things. He knew when the game needed a lift. How many times in commentary did we call him the heartbeat of the team? And then Franny's right. Once you get that line established, I guess the other lines fall into place. And I remember Culligan and Walton suddenly started playing together, and they had chemistry, and that was pretty special. But yeah, Martin, Morissette, and Lord, certainly for that kind of November to maybe Challenge Cup final, just before perhaps we ran out of steam, that line was by far the dominant line in the country.
Well, that's it for part 1 of the 14-15 season and the first year of new ownership. Some great stories in that episode, I'm sure you'll all agree. We will be back next week with part 2, where of course the main talking point will be all about the Challenge Cup final, the trophy no one thought we were going to win, and the real catalyst to what has been a fantastic couple of seasons in Devils history, and the start of what all Devils fans hope will be many, many more. Keep interacting with us on Twitter. We will have a new poll up shortly for episode 4, so you can get voting on what you'll want to listen to there. And again, just thank you for all your support. Keep listening, keep retweeting, keep subscribing, and we will keep enjoying bringing you these episodes each and every week. So goodbye for now, and we'll be back next week with part 2 of the 14-15 season, how to build a Challenge Cup winning team in just 6 weeks.